He has spoken on the topics faith, family, and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK, and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer, and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of StoryPower TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television, as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
I was cruising down the highway on my motorcycle, probably doing just a little bit over the speed limit. It's really loud, so you can't hear a whole lot of traffic around with the helmet on, and the wind and the exhaust. I can't even hear the stereo that's mounted on the motorcycle. But I knew I was in a safe spot, just in the left side of the lane, cars on either side of me, cars behind me. I'm watching them in the mirror constantly because I need to know how close they are if I have to stop fast. And then out of nowhere, boom! This very loud, very fast motorcycle zooms by me in my lane. He's in my lane. He's between me and the white line in the same lane. He's zooming in and out of lanes, zooming in and out of traffic, and it just keeps flying right past me. If I had thought for 1 second I'm going to change lanes, he would have hit me and probably created a traffic nightmare, as well as put both of our lives in danger. But I couldn't have stopped it because I never saw him coming. He was in my blind spot. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I know we all have blind spots, just like on the motorcycle in traffic, or, my wife's little Volvo has those little orange lights on the mirrors, so if there's somebody driving in your blind spot, you know they're there. And sometimes that little light doesn't come on when it's supposed to, and sometimes in her car, there's one sensor that's kind of lost its marbles, and a raindrop might cause it to constantly tell you that there's a car in the spot, or the sun, the setting sun might come from behind us as we're driving to the east in the evening, and there's constantly a car behind us and there's not actually a car there. So you got to look, you got to stop, and you got to look in that spot and see. But see, sometimes those blind spots are not in traffic, they're in the leader. And you've got to have somebody in your life who's willing to go, excuse me, but the emperor has no clothes on. You don't know the blind spots that you have. If you knew there was a blind spot, it wouldn't be a blind spot. But see, the bigger question sometimes isn't, what is my blind spot? It's, what's hiding behind the blind spot that I can't see? Imagine that you're driving down the highway and you get that plastic bag, which tends to happen, float up, and sometimes they get caught on the bumper and they wave at you like a hood ornament for a while, or sometimes they make it all the way to the windshield wipers and they're hung on the windshield wipers and they're flopping back and forth and they kind of block your view for a minute, and you turn on the windshield wipers and now it just moves even further and you have to deal with it. And the only way to deal with it is to find a safe place to pull over, to get out of the car, to walk to the front, remove the plastic bag from the windshield wipers. Because it's not the windshield wiper plastic bag that's actually the danger. It's what's hiding behind it. It's not the fact that there's something distracting you and obstructing your view. That's a problem all on its own, but it's never the major problem. How many leaders do we know who have lost their position, lost their careers, lost their opportunities because of blind spots? Well, those blind spots might be cultural. They might be changes in government policy. There might be changes in the EPA or changes in the FDA. New things that are approved, like fake chicken, or things that are disapproved, like petroleum products and coal. I mean, how many leaders had made millions of dollars mining coal hundreds of thousands of employees, millions of dollars over multiple generations. And it only took one presidential pen stroke to say, nope, no more coal. And hundreds of thousands of people, perhaps millions, lost their jobs, their careers, their livelihood. All of the training they'd done up to that point is now a moot point. Well, if you live in a world like that and you're not aware, blind spots, of the policies that can make a change in your career, in your education, in your family's financial position with a pen stroke, you're not paying attention. That's a blind spot. Now, you might have been distracted by something else, but it's the blind spot that allows those things to sneak up on your life and be as disastrous as a motorcycle sharing a lane at a high rate of speed. It's going to sneak up on you, and it's going to be ugly. But how many other blind spots do we have in life? I remember when I was in high school pulling out of a parking lot, and I had that A-pillar between the windshield and the side window. And as I looked out the front window and I looked out my left side and I looked at my right side, I saw nothing. But that A-pillar was enough to hide a pickup at just the right distance, at just the right angle. And as I started to pull out, I ended up hitting this little pickup broadside because I didn't see it coming. The danger isn't the blind spot itself. It's what's in the blind spot. It's what can sneak up on you. And so you've got to have a team of people around you who are willing to be honest and say, you know, I know you don't see this, or maybe you don't understand this, or maybe you don't comprehend this, or maybe you're not aware of this. But it takes people that, A, you've given permission to, and B, they have a deep concern about you and your success. Maybe because their success is attached to yours, or maybe because they just care about you as a person, or maybe it's because it's somebody you pay, a coach, a mentor, an outsider, someone with an objective view that is not at all attached to your success. They only know they want you to succeed as an individual, but they got no skin in the game. They're not going to rise or fall based on whether or not you fail or succeed. That's a whole different kind of a sounding board. A mentor who can say, I'm looking at what you're doing and I think there's a bad idea brewing over here, and you've got some bad relationships back here that you haven't dealt with yet, and you've got some issues of your own to deal with. See, one of the biggest blind spot problems we deal with as leaders is us. Yeah, I have my own distractions, my own personal issues, my own personal problems, my own things of the past, personality quirks, weaknesses of character, insecurities of my own that cause me to make decisions, to do things in relationships, to do things in business that are not always beneficial to everybody else around me. Sometimes I can be straight up self-serving. I do what's good for me. I blame others when I made the mistake. I know you've never done that, ever, right? Because that would be a blind spot. And then you would need somebody to point it out and go, hey, look what you just did. I spoke recently of a client of mine who had an employee who came and said, you need to apologize to so-and-so. And it was really hard because the person who made the call, who said, you need to apologize, was a very junior employee compared to the person they were speaking to, telling them to apologize, and even the person they said you need to apologize to. But they had, I don't know, the guts, the brass, the cojones, whatever you want to say, to come forward and say what you said was harsh and it was unwarranted. And you need to fix that because people are important. That takes a lot of guts. If you're the kind of leader who doesn't have room for that in your life, you don't have a space where somebody can call you out when you're wrong, who can tell you, you can't blame me on this. That was you. You made that mistake. Well, if you don't have that kind of people in your life, then you already have a problem. But when you have that kind of people in your life, the next thing you've got to ask is, what are you willing to do about it? If you got that plastic bag stuck in your windshield wiper, are you willing to be late to wherever you're going, or delay, or get out of traffic and pull over and know you got to catch up with all those cars again? Are you willing to do that to get that bag off your windshield wiper? You're just going to keep turning on the windshield wipers and hoping eventually it flies away without taking your windshield wiper with it. Are you going to take it off there and put it in the trash can because that would be the responsible thing to do? Otherwise, you're just going to pull it off, throw it on the ground, or turn on your wipers until it eventually leaves and probably sticks to somebody else's car in the same kind of way, because that's what plastic bags tend to do. It's almost like they have a mind of their own, but we know they don't. But if you're not willing to address the problems when they're pointed out, what is the good of pointing out the problem? If you're not going to take care of it, if you're not going to do something about it, as inconvenient as it might be, as painful as it might be, if you're not willing to go, well, I don't like that you're right, but you are, and I have to do something about it. See, I've been reading through this little book by John Maxwell, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And in this topic of blind spots, he points out 4 very specific blind spots that are personal to the leader, that things that you might look at and go, well, that doesn't have anything to do with their organization. No, because you're the leader and you're the problem. And so he says one of those 4 problems is the singular perspective. No matter how a conversation begins, you end up talking about your own favorite subject. Well, that could be a blind spot, because you find out that everything is all about you. That's definitely a blind spot. That's a problem. How about this one? You keep giving the same speech, lecture, and piece of advice over and over again. You're overly focused on a single concern. You may keep coming back to your favorite bit of advice and not even be aware of it. Well, that could be a problem. How about this one? You're always right. Yeah, it's a challenge when you deal with somebody who's always right, because they will find a way to be right, or at least to make you wrong, no matter what. Even when they're not right, they're right. Here's a little secret for you. Nobody is always right. Nobody. I got one perfect dude. He hadn't been around for a minute, but every human that I've met, they got flaws. They got mistakes. They got errors. Errors in the way they understand, errors in the way they feel, errors in the way they interpret, errors in the things that they do. And if they think they're perfect and always right, there's the first mistake. There's the mistake. They're not always right. They're wrong. But see, these little problems, they can continue on. One of my biggest has always been insecurity. That's always been a blind spot. Well, I say it's a blind spot. I'm very aware that I'm very insecure. I always have been. A people pleaser. I always want everybody's approval. I always want the applause. I remember I was about 14, maybe 15 years old, cruising down the road with my mom. And I turned to my mom and I said, how come my sisters get so much more of your attention? I don't feel like you spend as much time with me or have as much conversation with me or tell me how great I'm doing on things as often as you do with my sisters. And she said to me, because you're the resilient one. You're the one that's always pushing hard. You're the one that doesn't need much encouragement. You're the one that just kind of does it on your own. You always have. Well, nobody would know that better than my mother by the time I was 14 years old. But I look back on that almost 40 years later and realize I'm still looking for somebody to pat me on the back and tell me how good I am, to tell me how awesome I am. Well, ironically enough, right here in John Maxwell's book, he talks about insecurity as a blind spot, as a reason it's hard to lead yourself. He says, do you have a hard time giving credit to others? Could be a problem. Do you keep information from your staff? I don't really have a big problem with that. I don't have a giant staff, but I'm probably, for better or worse, one of the most transparent people you'll ever meet. Do you try to keep your staff away from good leaders? Ooh, now that could be a problem. Anybody ever lead a team and feel like somebody else is trying to scalp your best? They're trying to take the best leaders. I was talking to somebody just the other day in a very competitive industry. Her job is hiring and staffing. She's got like 9 different offices. And she said, it's always hard to find good people. I said, well, where do you find them? I mean, what's the profile? What do they look like? What kind of background do they have? What kind of education do they have? What kind of personality type do they have? What kind of successes do they have? What kind of wins would make them a great candidate, or losses would make them an immediate disqualified? And she said, truth be told, the only way we find great candidates is to scalp them from competitors who already have great candidates. That's scary. But if you're the insecure leader who's afraid that you haven't provided the best environment for your team, you're probably a little concerned that somebody's going to come in and take your very best from you. That could be a problem. Are you threatened by the growth of others? And do you often micromanage? There's a double-edged sword to micromanagement. It's a blind spot all on its own. See, there's the one side of micromanagement that says, I've got to keep my fingers in this because I want it to be the very best. And I know better than anybody else how to make it the very best. And so I'm going to oversee and I'm going to input into all of these people. But then I realized that I'm not just overseeing them. I'm not just giving them the best opportunity. I'm not just giving them the opportunity to excel. I'm actually doing it for them. Well, why would I be actually doing it for them? Well, I might be doing it for them because I'm afraid if they figure out everything, well, let's go back 2 questions. And he says, do you hide information from your team? Sometimes that hiding information from your team looks like, I don't want you to know how to solve all the problems on your own because then that makes me dispensable. Oh, that could be a problem. I don't want to be an expendable leader. I want to be somebody that you have to rely on, almost to the point of codependence. I want to be here for a long time. I'm going to make myself invaluable. Well, you don't make yourself invaluable by limiting the ability of your team. That's a blind spot. And if you're doing that unconsciously because you have insecurities, maybe you've never even identified the fact that you hide information from your team. You don't give them everything they need to succeed. I actually worked for a team for a short time that I didn't know until later. In fact, after I'd been there 2 years and it was time for us to part ways, 2 of the guys that worked there said to me, we had a bet for how long you'd last. One said 6 weeks, one said 6 months. Nobody thought you'd make it 2 years. And then I began to think back after I left there how many times there were problems I was asked to solve that it seemed like, that if you took the fuse out of a car that kept the horn from honking and you spent 5 hours replacing the horn, you would feel like a complete idiot when you put the fuse back in. There were that kind of problems. Hey, solve this problem. Oh, sorry, we unplugged that. That's why it's not working. It was that kind of sabotage. It was that kind of, well, we didn't give you all the clues to solve the puzzle. In fact, there are probably some puzzle pieces missing and some pieces from other puzzles in the box. If you're doing that kind of thing intentionally, a shame on you as a leader. If you're doing that kind of thing because you're unaware that you're doing that kind of thing because it's just your personality type, you have a problem that you need to solve. It's called a blind spot. You need to become more aware of the way that you treat people and the decisions that you make in that instance. Now, the next one John Maxwell addresses is a hard one for a lot of people to hear. He talks about weak character. Here's some really simple questions to ask yourself if you, as a leader, maybe it's you that has the problem, or maybe it's you that identifies it in somebody in your team. Maybe somebody you lead, maybe somebody above you. Just ask these few questions. Do you often miss deadlines? Ooh, that's a good question. Do you make vows, resolutions, and decisions to change and then go back to your old behavior? Ooh, hard. Do you place more importance on pleasing others than you do on maintaining the values you espouse? I had a chance this weekend to spend some time with a retired Chief Master Sergeant, a guy who spent 30 years in the Air Force. In fact, his service window extends from the Vietnam War all the way through the end of Desert Storm, Desert Shield. That's a long time in service. He's seen a lot. And as a senior enlisted guy reaching Chief Master Sergeant, I understand means you're in the top 1% of senior enlisted individuals in the U.S. Air Force. That's quite an accomplishment. But see, he made a statement. Wow, we got all kinds of weird things going on in here. I first did this show and there was no audio whatsoever, and now I started again and now I've got weird little squirrels running around. I don't know if we've got perfect audio online or not, but this Chief Master Sergeant pointed out to me that in order to reach that high level, that 1%, in the U.S. military, you've got to be willing to do things that are outside your job scope, which means you've got to be willing to do things, in his words, to stand out. And I thought, well, that's an interesting perspective, because as I was growing up in the military and growing up in leadership, we call that a suck up. Somebody who always did little favors on the side or did those charity things to get extra credit, or they had that selfish ambition to raise themselves to the top. But the truth is, if your values say we want to be number one, we want to be the best, we want to be the best of the best, we want to live to a standard of excellence, if that's what you claim, then going the extra mile, doing above and beyond, being more than everybody expects you to be, those are very important aspects for your success. That's a big deal. You've got to be willing to go that extra mile, do that extra thing. And if you're not, success is probably going to be just out of your reach, because you will change your moral compass. You will change your values. You will reduce yourself to just getting along easily with everybody else and not holding yourself or anybody else to the standards of excellence that are necessary. If you find yourself dealing with any of these issues, the insecurities, the self-focus, the weakness of character, these are blind spots that will take you out. These are personal problems. These are personal commitments. You need a coach. You need a mentor. You need somebody that you can be accountable to. Probably good to have some people on your team whose success is tied to yours, who are willing to go straight in and say, hey, you messed this up. You got to fix this. But you also absolutely must have those people who are objective, who are outside, whose success is not tied to your success. You may have to pay them, but their success is not tied to your success. They're going to be successful whether you are or not. Those kind of people are going to have a different perspective on helping you to address the problems you have, helping you to find the solutions that you're looking for. But if you're operating in a blind spot, if you're just getting more frustrated by the minute that somebody's zooming by in your own lane, or that plastic bag is still stuck on your windshield wiper, and you've got something hiding behind that that you can't see, like a farm tractor about to pull out on the highway, or a semi who has stopped suddenly, those things can end your career, end your life, if you're not careful. And in your career, those distractions, they're blind spots as well. They're hiding things that you didn't want to hide. You need to be aware. Get somebody on your team who will tell you the truth, inside the team and outside the team, who will tell you the truth and help you to spot those blind spots, help you to find those things that in leading yourself, you're simply not aware of. It will be painful. It will be hard to admit those things up front. It will be expensive, but not nearly as expensive or nearly as painful to address the issues as it is to leave them unaddressed and lose your career, lose your legacy, lose your investments. Take the time to work on you. That's the first blind spot you've got to solve. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.